The bench was too high for their legs, so they dangled, stiff, tired, one sock missing between them. No one saw them arrive. The train had long since groaned away, dragging its smoke and passengers behind it, leaving only dust and paper scraps blowing across the platform like ghosts who'd missed their departure. They sat quiet. The older one, barely 5, but with a look like she'd been 5 for far too long, held a burlap sack against her chest. The younger girl leaned into her side, eyes glassed over, her thumb long out of her mouth but the shape of it still pressed to her lips. People passed, but none paused. Just one more bundle of poor folk waiting for someone who'd never come. The wind didn't howl, not yet, it whispered. Dry and cold. Like the kind that made your bones remember something sorrowful. The older girl blinked hard, once. A boot scuffed behind her. Not close. Not yet. Earlier, Mama had kissed their foreheads and told them to stay on the bench. That the man at the counter would give her the rest of the ticket. She hadn't taken the bag. Only the red ribbon from the little one's hair. That had been morning. The girl didn't know what time it was anymore. But shadows had stretched long enough to make her stomach shrink, not growl. Then, boots again. A man. Not one of the ones that glared. Not the ones who walked around as if the world owed them every board they stepped on. This one walked slow, like he was counting something only he could see. He passed once. Didn't look. Passed twice. Eyes flicked. The third time, he stopped near the far post, leaned against it, and rolled a toothpick between his teeth like he was thinking about saying something but didn't trust the air to carry it right. She didn't turn her head. Didn't blink. The younger girl had fallen asleep, her cheek nestled into the coarse fabric of the coat that wasn't hers. Behind them, a door slammed. The station master shouted something vulgar about strays and trash and how he wasn't running a church. The man didn't move. Instead, he looked at the little one. And when he looked, something behind his eyes, something not quite broken, but hollowed out by years, flickered. His hand came up slow. Not to touch, just to lift his hat and let the wind tug a piece of hair back from his forehead. It was long enough to look wild, short enough not to bother with scissors. "Where's your people?" he asked. The girl blinked at him. He didn't say it again. Didn't squat like the kind ones did. Didn't offer candy or two bright smiles. He just looked at them like he wasn't looking at girls, but grief in small coats. Then, just when the silence between them had grown too wide, he took a step forward. She flinched. Small. Almost unnoticeable. He stopped. Then, without a word, he reached down and picked up the burlap sack that sat between them. The girl jolted. "That's—" He didn't take it far. Just slung it over his shoulder. Looked at her, steady. "You can tell me what's in it once we ain't sitting here in the wind." She looked down at her sister. The little one stirred, rubbed her eyes with the back of her wrist. When she saw the sack gone, she sat bolt upright. Her lips trembled. "It's okay," the older one said quickly. He's just carrying it." The man turned. Walked away. Didn't beckon. Didn't ask. But after a long moment, the girls slid off the bench. The younger one stumbled, tripped, and the man turned his head, not his body, and waited until her hand found her sister's again. They followed. The platform faded behind them like a bad dream. The station master shouted again, but his voice cracked with the cold, and no one looked back. Down the dirt road, past the old corral fence with its sagging posts, the man stopped by a paint mare tied to a post and tied the sack to the back of the saddle. Still, not a word. Then he turned, crouched down slow, knees stiff, like someone who'd taken a bullet once and never spoke of it, and opened his arms. The little one shrank back. But the older one, she hesitated. He didn't move. Didn't urge. Just waited like a rock waits for the river to come to it. Then the little one took a step forward, then another. He scooped her up in one arm, gently, as if she were made of snow. The older one climbed up on the saddle herself, eyes wide but unflinching. The man mounted behind her. Still, not a word. The sun was falling into dust by then, bleeding its last light across the prairie like someone had split a peach over the land. They rode through the dry wind. No birds. No dogs barking. Only hooves thudding soft into the hard dirt. After a while, the girl whispered, "Are you taking us somewhere?" His chest rose. "Somewhere you can eat." That was enough. The younger girl laid her head against his coat. The older one stared out across the nothing. In the distance, a tree stood alone, bent like it had once tried to run but got frozen in place. The man's coat flapped in the wind. At one point, the younger one tugged at something in his pocket. He didn't stop her. She pulled out a worn tobacco tin and opened it. Inside, not tobacco, but feathers. Small, delicate, mostly white, one gray. The man didn't explain. The girl didn't ask. She just closed it again and tucked it back. By the time they reached the edge of the canyon line, stars had begun to blink awake overhead, quiet and pale like children afraid to be seen. He lifted the little one down first, careful as if she might shatter. The older one slid off on her own. The cabin was barely more than 4 walls and a roof, with a tin chimney poking up like a crooked finger. Smoke didn't rise. No fire yet. He opened the door. Let them walk in first. Inside, it smelled like cedar and dust. A table, 2 chairs. A cot in the corner with a blanket that looked older than all 3 of them put together. The girls stood, unsure. He set the sack down in the corner, then took off his coat and hung it on a nail. In the silence that followed, the little one reached out and took her sister's hand again. That's when he knelt. Not low. Just enough that they could see him, not as tall, but as someone reachable. He said, "Name's Colt." They looked at each other, then back at him. The older one finally whispered, Are you gonna keep us?" He blinked slow. That word. He didn't answer it. He just walked to the stove, lit a match, and started piling kindling inside. "I ain't much of a cook," he said, quiet. "But there's beans." The older girl stepped closer. The younger one watched the fire grow. And in that hush, that warm hush after a long cold wind, something shifted. The older one walked to the cot and sat. The little one followed. Colt stirred the beans, pulled 3 tin cups from the shelf and set them on the table like he'd always had 3. And outside, the wind picked up, not cruel, but colder now, as if the land was waiting to see if the warmth inside would last. Then, soft as the first snowflake that never lands, the little one, who hadn't spoken in hours, touched her red ribbon, looked at him and whispered, "Mama left it with us. Said not to lose it. That it meant we were still hers." Colt looked at the ribbon, and then he said, "You didn't lose it. You carried it." She blinked, and he added, quieter still, "That's how I knew." She tilted her head. "Knew what?" "That you weren't waiting to be taken." He turned to look at the older girl. "You were waiting for someone who'd carry what you already carried." The older one looked at the fire, then whispered, "Do we find Papa in you?" Colt didn't flinch. He just looked at the ribbon, then at the girls. Then stepped forward, took the burlap sack from the floor, opened it. Inside, a doll with no eyes, a half loaf of bread, a tin fork, a folded, tear-stained letter, and something wrapped in cloth. He didn't unfold it, just held it, then looked at the girls, not like a man making a promise, but like one who already had. "We leave the station now," he said. "Everything else, we'll figure on the way." And outside, the wind began to howl, not in rage, but in memory, as if something lost was finally letting go. The cabin didn't speak much, but it held its own kind of memory. Dust thick on the windowsill, a dent in the floorboards where a rocker once sat too long, and the kind of silence that wasn't empty, just paused. Colt pushed open the door and let it creak wide. The girls didn't rush in. They stood just past the threshold, like they were waiting to be told this wasn't really for them. Inside, the chill hadn't lifted yet. The stove crackled slow behind him, but its heat hadn't reached the corners. He tossed another log in, then nodded once. "'S'all right. Ain't no one here but the wind. And she don't say much." The older girl stepped first, cautious, but not afraid. The younger followed with her fingers brushing along the doorframe like it might disappear behind her. Colt unrolled the bedroll he'd taken from under the cot, shook it out, laid it in the warmest patch near the stove. No sheets. No proper pillows. Just worn wool and quiet mercy. The older girl looked at it like it was too much. The little one dropped her ribbon beside it, curled onto the fabric without a word, and closed her eyes. Colt stirred beans with the back of a knife and poured them into one tin bowl. Set it between the girls. Waited. They didn't thank him. They didn't need to. The only sound was the metal clink of the spoon against the bowl as they passed it back and forth. He watched without watching, not out of pity, out of something quieter. Like a man who once watched something break and never learned how to stop seeing the cracks in everything else since. Later, after the fire climbed higher and the sky outside darkened like bruised velvet, he pulled a chair to the hearth and sat. Didn't speak. Just watched the flames. The girls fell asleep side by side, breath steady, bodies slack in that special way only children have, like all the fear in their bones had been melted by one warm night. He didn't sleep. The past didn't sleep either. It paced, just out of sight, like it always had. In the morning, he saddled the mare and walked into town with the sack slung across his back. Left the girls with the door latched and a note scratched on old parchment. You're safe. Don't open unless it's me. The town wasn't far. A half-day's ride or less if you didn't mind the wind fighting your collar. It wasn't big. One saloon, one store, one leaning church, and too many eyes. He walked into the general store, nodding at the bell. The owner, stocky, mustached, too nosy for someone who sold sugar, squinted at him. Don't see you often, Hanley. Usually means trouble's close behind. Colt didn't answer. Just picked up a spool of coarse blue fabric, 2 small wooden spoons, a tin of molasses. Winter's gonna hit early this year, the man muttered, bagging it up. Best not keep too many mouths around. Colt slid the coins across the counter slow. No one's kept, he said, voice low. Not here. On the way out, he passed Ruthie sitting on her chair just outside the livery stable. Gray hair in a thick braid, boots stitched with age and stubbornness. She eyed the sack, then his eyes. You feeding ghosts now, she said. He didn't stop walking, but he did say, feeding girls. She spat toward the road. Lord help you. Ain't no harder task. He didn't argue. She was right. He came back mid-morning. The door was still latched. Inside, the girls were awake, sitting on the bedroll. The older had opened the parchment note but didn't tear it. Just smoothed it and folded it again. I didn't open the door, she said. Colt nodded. Set the new spoons on the table, placed a folded dress of rough blue cotton beside them. Don't know sizes, he murmured. But they looked near right. The little one didn't speak. Just crawled forward and traced the stitches on the collar. Like they were holy. By mid-afternoon, Colt had taken to chopping wood behind the cabin. The younger girl came out once, hid behind the water barrel, peeked out when she thought he wasn't looking. He swung the axe, steady. Always the same pace. Would split clean. No grunting. No showing off. After the 5th log, he glanced toward the barrel. You ever split one? She shook her head. Quick. He knelt, placed a small log upright, and held out the axe, handle first. Her hands were too small. But she held it. He helped guide her grip. Lifted it with her, slow. Let her feel the weight. Together, they brought it down. The log cracked clean. She looked up at him, not smiling. Just breathing different. Like someone who remembered they were still alive. That night, they sat at the table, all 3. 2 cups of stew. 1 spoon passed between them. Colt ate last. Afterward, the older girl said, You ain't asked our names. He looked at her, gentle. Would you like me to? She hesitated, then nodded. The younger looked up. I'm Mabel, she whispered. The older straightened. And I'm June. Colt dipped his head. Mabel. June. They stared at him, waiting. He didn't offer a full smile. Just said, "Call me Colt." The stove cracked. The wind outside pressed a little harder against the walls. June leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Do you got a family?" Colt looked into the fire. "Used to." She didn't ask more. Mabel took his hand. Her fingers were sticky from stew. He didn't pull away. That night, they slept in the cot. Both girls curled beneath the same quilt. Colt sat by the stove, carving something into a scrap of wood. He wasn't good at words, but his hands had always known how to say things his mouth couldn't. In the morning, Ruthie knocked. He opened the door. She stood with a basket and a look like she'd chewed glass and liked it. "Don't make me say I was wrong. Just take it." Inside the basket, bread, lye soap, a small pair of shoes. "She's seen the girls," Ruthie said. "People talk." Colt raised an eyebrow. She crossed her arms. "Don't look at me that way. I didn't say they were talking wrong. Just loud." He took the basket. "You keep 'em," she said softly. "You best tell the town who they are to you, before someone else does." Colt looked over his shoulder. Inside, Mabel was laughing, real, soft, short. June was showing her how to button the blue dress. He looked back at Ruthie. "They're mine." She blinked. "You sure?" "I'm sure they ain't nobody else's anymore." Ruthie nodded once. "Then you'll need more wood come winter." And she walked off without another word. That evening, Colt pulled a box from under the cot. Inside, feathers, stones, a rusted belt buckle, a broken harmonica, pieces of things once meant something. He placed 2 carved blocks next to the girls as they sat by the fire. One had a small star carved into it, the other a heart. June picked hers up. "You made this." He nodded. "What's it mean?" "Just means I see you." She looked down. Her lips trembled, not in fear, but in that sudden way children cry when they didn't know they needed to. She stood, walked across the floor, and pressed her head against his side. "I think you were always comin'. You just didn't know where to go yet." He didn't move, just rested a hand on her shoulder. Outside, the wind had calmed. For the first time in days, it didn't claw at the shutters. It whispered, soft, like it respected what was blooming inside. Later, Colt stepped out onto the porch alone. The stars overhead were sharp, piercing. He thought of his father's rope, of a winter long ago, of silence and what it had cost him. Behind him, June called, "Colt." He turned. She stood holding the burlap sack. "We didn't look in it after Mama gave it, but I think maybe you should." He walked back in, opened the sack. Inside, folded deep beneath the bread and the letter, was a slip of paper, a ticket stub, and written across the back, in hurried script, "Give them to someone good, someone who don't turn away." Colt stared at it, and for the first time in years, something in his chest cracked, not painfully, but like frost giving way to water. He looked at the girls. June watched him with her ribbon in hand. He didn't speak, but the look he gave her said what words never could. "I won't turn away. Not now. Not ever." The next morning broke cold and dry, sun-thin and colorless. It painted long, pale fingers across the wooden floor, stretching through the open shutters like it wasn't sure it belonged inside. June sat on the porch steps with her knees tucked beneath the hem of her dress, eyes locked on the ridge. She didn't speak, didn't blink much either. Her ribbon was tied around her wrist now, knotted soft. Mabel lay curled behind the rocker, humming without tune, twisting a straw of hay between her fingers. The tune wasn't real, just breath pretending to be song. Inside, Colt cleaned the rifle he hadn't touched in weeks. Not for need, but for memory. Some things, when neglected too long, rusted in more ways than one. He just finished oiling the lever when the sound came, hooves on the road. Not the soft rhythm of someone passing, but that deliberate kind of pace. like the man riding had already decided he'd come too far to turn back. Colt set the rifle against the wall and stepped onto the porch. June didn't turn her head. That the kind of ride where someone pretends to ask but already made up his mind. Colt blinked. She was 5, maybe 6. But the voice she just used was older than both of them put together. He said nothing, just nodded once. The rider came into view around the cottonwood grove. A tall gelding. The man atop it wore a dark coat, buttons gleaming like sharp teeth in the light. His hat was too fine for someone who spent real time in the wind. Colt stepped down from the porch just as the man dismounted. "Colt Hanley," the man said. Colt didn't confirm. The stranger unbuttoned his coat slow, pulling a folded paper from the inside breast pocket. "I represent the county placement office out of Pear Ridge. Got a notice about 2 minors without kin, last seen at Revell Station. Some woman named Ruth said they were out this way." Colt didn't blink. "You always show up uninvited with papers no one sent for?" The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I show up when children are left behind. That's my job." Colt's jaw tensed. They weren't left. They were carried. Doesn't change the law. Behind him, June stood. Mabel came out, clutching the porch post like it might pull her back in time. "They yours?" the man asked. Colt didn't look away. "They're not yours." "That's not an answer." Colt stepped closer, voice low. "They weren't being kept warm. They weren't being fed. They were on a bench with frost under their nails. I didn't take them, I answered them." The man held out the paper. "You can say whatever you like. But without names, without signatures, they're no more yours than cattle with someone else's brand." June's voice rose behind them. "Our name's on the letter. Mama wrote it." The man turned to her. "And where is your mama, miss?" She stopped. The words caught, thick and unfinished. Mabel took her hand, but her eyes never left Colt. Colt turned back to the man. The sack had a letter. A stub from a train ticket. It said find someone good. Someone who don't turn away. That won't hold up in court. Court ain't what's keeping them warm at night. The man stepped forward, lowering his voice. "If you care about them, really care, you'll do this proper. Come into town. Fill out the forms. If you're serious, we'll consider placement." Colt didn't answer right away. His fingers twitched once, a subtle tell. One he hated. One he hadn't shown since the war ended and his brother didn't come home. "I'll come," he said. "But not today. You've got 3 days. After that, I bring others." He turned, mounted his horse, and was gone before the dust even had time to settle. Colt didn't move until the sound disappeared entirely. Then he turned toward the girls. Mabel's bottom lip trembled. Colt crouched low, arms resting on his knees. "You scared?" June stepped in front of her sister. "Not of you." He gave a half-smile, one corner of his mouth just barely lifting. "I'll fix this," he said. June nodded. "You already are." That night, Colt pulled the box from beneath the bed again. This time, he took out the letter, unfolded it. The words were smudged at the edges. Water. Tears. Maybe snowmelt. Their names are June and Mabel. "If you find this, it means I didn't make it. I'm not asking for forever. Just for warmth. For now. Give them to someone who don't turn away. No last name. No origin. Just a plea." Colt stared at the words until they blurred. He stood, walked to the window. Outside, the stars were sharp again. Brighter than he remembered. He whispered, "If forever's too much, maybe now is enough." In the morning, they rode to Ruthie's. June rode behind Colt, arms around his waist. Mabel rode in front, head against his chest. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. Ruthie met them with a pail in her hands and a frown on her brow. "You heard." Colt nodded. "You gonna give 'em up?" No. She set the pail down. You gonna do the papers? Yes. Good. He hesitated. You ever see someone write a name that ain't real? Ruthie tilted her head. You thinking of giving em yours? He looked down. Don't feel right. Yet. Ruthie's voice softened. Ain't about feeling right. It's about making right. He swallowed. Back at the cabin, the girls were quiet. June sat at the table with the block he'd carved her. She traced the star again and again. Do you want us? She asked suddenly. Colt didn't pretend to misunderstand. I didn't come to the station looking, he said. But I saw you. And I didn't leave. She looked at him long, like she was weighing his words on a scale too heavy for most men. I think Mama was trying to take us north, June said softly. Some place colder. She said cold people don't ask questions. That's where she was going. Colt crouched beside her. Then I'm glad she didn't get there. Mabel sat on the floor by the hearth, quiet as ever. She reached into the sack, pulled out the folded cloth again, unwrapped it. Inside, not money, not papers. Just a silver button. Shiny. Heavy. Military issue. Colt took it gently. His thumb passed over the engraving. He looked at June. You never said your last name. She hesitated. Mama said not to. Why? She said it came with danger. Colt nodded once, slowly. I ain't asking to know it. June reached forward. But you should. She leaned close, whispered in his ear. His brow furrowed. That name, that's... She nodded. Colt stood slowly. The room changed. The air thinned. That name belonged to a man who ran freight and fear through 3 counties. A man who died trying to outrun justice. The girls didn't just carry sorrow. They carried someone else's blood debt. And now it had found him. Outside, the wind picked up, not wild, but full of grit. Like it had teeth again. Colt stared at the button in his hand. It had a clean shine. It had been polished, not by the mother, but likely by the child. Something to remember. Something to cling to. I won't tell, June said, eyes locked on his. Colt didn't look afraid. He looked certain. You don't need to. He walked to the hearth. Set the button beside the carved blocks. The star. The heart. Then turned back. You didn't choose where you came from. He placed a hand over his chest. But you get to choose where you belong. And the wind, just then, went quiet. The morning after the name was whispered, Colt sat long at the table, elbows braced, eyes fixed on the silver button beside the carved blocks. The stove crackled behind him, but his coffee had gone cold. The wind outside was no longer kind. It scratched at the corners of the cabin like a stray trying to be let in. He knew the name she'd given him, knew what it carried. Jasper Keller, the outlaw who robbed payroll carriages, vanished into mountain passes and left bodies in his shadow. Hunted, hung, and forgotten by most. But his kin. They were always marked. And now Colt had 2 of them sleeping in the bedroll beside his hearth, arms wrapped around each other like the world might take them still. He ran a hand down his jaw, the stubble rough like frostbit wood. He didn't regret bringing them. Not even now. But he knew what this meant. Someone, somewhere, would want them gone for reasons older than they could name. The knock came mid-morning. He opened the door slowly. Ruthie stood there, wrapped in a threadbare shawl, her braid dusted with wind-blown grit. Behind her, a man leaned against a post, not the kind who asked permission. Long duster, wide belt, 2 pistols. He didn't bother hiding the star pinned crooked to his chest. Marshal, Colt said, stepping out onto the porch. The man nodded once. Hanley. Got word from Pear Ridge. Couple of orphans registered under false names. One matches the description of a girl tied to Jasper Keller. Colt didn't flinch. They're 5 and 3. The marshal's jaw ticked. Keller burned 3 towns before he hung. Doesn't matter if his girl was in a crib when it happened. There's blood marks, and some folks don't care how small the trail starts. They've done nothing wrong. They carry his name. No, Colt said. They don't. They carried his shadow. That's different. Ruthie stepped between them, voice sharp. They've been fed, cleaned, dressed. Not a bruise on them since he took him in. That's more than I can say for most who get handed a badge and a warrant. The marshal didn't like that. His mouth twitched, but he didn't answer. He held out a folded telegram. Train comes through this evening. I've been told to put them on it. Sending M east for reassignment. Clean start. Records buried. They already had a start, Colt said. And it's here. Ruthie looked at him hard. They won't stop with papers, Colt. You know that. This kind of blood doesn't wash out in court. He looked back at the marshal. Who sent the telegram? The marshal didn't answer. Just tapped the paper against his palm and turned to leave. You've got till sundown. Don't be late. They rode out before noon. Colt didn't tell the girls where they were going. He just wrapped Mabel in the warmest coat he had, tucked the ribbon into June's pocket, and saddled the mare like it was just another supply run. The train station looked smaller now. Older. Not because it had changed, but because Colt had. He remembered that bench, where two sets of legs once dangled and no one asked their names. Where silence had held them like a punishment. Now, they stood taller. Mabel held his hand. June stood beside him, not behind. The station master blinked when he saw them. You again. Colt didn't answer. Just led the girls to the far side, where the telegraph man sat scratching at paper with his ink-stained fingers. Where's the body? The man looked up. Body. The woman. Their mother. You sent word she boarded alone. You find her. The man scratched his beard. Don't know much. Sheriff in Tevis Creek said a woman was found dead in a cold car. Clutchin' a second-class ticket. Wrapped in threadbare cloth. No name. Only clue was a doll. No eyes. June's hand tightened on Colt's. He knelt beside her. You knew. She shook her head. I dreamed it. A cold place. Too dark for the sun. Mama standing on the tracks, waving but never speaking. Colt stood slowly. Looked toward the train tracks. She had 2 tickets, he said. But only used one. She never meant to leave us, June whispered. No, Colt said. She meant for you to find someone else who wouldn't. As the sun dipped low, the train whistled in the distance. The marshal was already there, hands on his hips, watching the horizon like a man waiting for something ugly to arrive. Paperwork's ready, he said. Names can be changed. We'll place 'em with quiet folks up north. I'm quiet, Colt said. The marshal raised an eyebrow. You really willing to saddle yourself with another man's burden? They're not a burden. They're what's left. The engine shrieked as it rolled in. Smoke spilled across the tracks like a curtain, like the sky itself didn't want to see what happened next. The marshal stepped forward, held out his hand. I'm not asking again. June stepped behind Colt. Mabel whimpered, low and soft. Colt didn't move. Tell me something, he said. You ever carry a child who don't know what trust means yet? You ever watch someone cry without making a sound? You ever see someone choose you, even when they ain't got proof you'll stay? The marshal frowned. This isn't about heart. It's about law. Colt took one step forward, voice calm as a held breath. Sometimes, the law forgets who it's supposed to protect. Ruthie arrived then, out of breath, clutching a folded envelope. Got something, she said. Came from Tevis Creek. Found with the woman's body. Didn't get processed till this morning. She handed it to Colt. He opened it slow. Inside, a second ticket. Unused. And a note. The last one ain't mine. It's for the one who stays. Whoever holds their hands, let them ride home. The marshal read it over Colt's shoulder. His jaw clicked. Still not a signature. Colt stepped forward. You want proof? Fine. He took June's hand. Then Mabel's. Tell me who they flinch from. They didn't. The marshal looked at them long. Then at Ruthie. Then at the train, steaming and impatient. He muttered, God help me, and turned. You keep 'em, he said. But their name stays gone. Colt nodded once. That name already left them. The marshal boarded the train. Doors shut. Smoke billowed. The whistle cut the sky. And then it was gone. Just wind again. Colt crouched low beside the girls. You all right? June nodded. Mabel blinked up. We go home now? He looked around. At the dust, the fading tracks, the memory of benches and papers and things that once tried to pull them apart. He took their hands. No, he said softly. We build one. And as they turned toward the mare, Colt lifted June into the saddle first. Mabel clung to his back. They rode slow. Not fleeing. Not hiding. Just returning. And behind them, on the platform, a silver button sat on the edge of the bench, left there by Colt without a word. A marker. Not of where it ended, but where they were never left again. Which city are you watching our video from? Please leave a comment. Please subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you.